So welcome to the Mal and Johnny Show, and we're looking at heroes in today's programme, and one in particular, Elvis Presley. Now then, Johnny Tudor, do you remember hearing the first Elvis Presley records? Were you around then?
Yeah, I bought it when I was a little kid. I was only, how old was I? Blink your neck. I was in junior school, and I bought Heartbreak Hotel.
Right.
Since my baby left me. Yeah, I bought that, and the other, I think Blue Suede Shoes was on the other side. That was the first thing with Elvis, I remember. But then I remember years later, I was never a big fan after that. But then I was in Birmingham doing a cabaret, and I was bored in the daytime, and there was a film on, Elvis on Tour. Right. And I went to watch it. And I tell you what, he sang the American Trilogy, and it just blew me away, gave me, goosebumps. And I've been putting it in my act ever since.
Wow.
So it really impressed me, the way he did it. His charisma came over.
Yeah.
Not so much his voice, but the way he came on stage with the big cape, Yes. And they played like, what was the opening music? Da, 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 da.
Oh, yeah.
Also, Zach Randers. Yeah. So that was his opening music. He came onto that. No, I was just blown away with his charisma and his showmanship.
Because people, we've all grown up with Elvis, different generations, and he's either brand new or old hat, and then you rediscover him and all that. But for people listening who weren't alive when those records, Elvis Presley records, came out, what were they like? I mean, was it that astounding? Was it that different?
Well, he was the first, wasn't he? He was the first real rock and roller, if you like. He was the king. and he kept being banned off television because he swiveled his hips too much. And Americans were very prudish in those days. Well, he was too sexual, can't have that. Yeah. I remember doing a show on one of my ships. I was doing a show, and I used to do like a parody of not Tom Jones, of Elvis. I'd be swinging my hips about. Someone called me a Bulgarian.
Because you look at it now and it looks so tame, doesn't it? It looks so tame. Yeah. But the whole world was very different in the 50s and early 60s. It was a different world, and it's really hard to understand how he could have caused so much. Well, it was moral decline, wasn't it? I mean, it's a bit like when Rock Around the Clock came out with Bill Haley. You couldn't have a more cuddly guy than Bill Haley, could you?
I know, but they were ripping up the seats in the picture houses, dancing in the aisles. Decadence.
So you bought those early records. But then, what is it? I actually think it was Bruce Springsteen said Elvis didn't die, from hamburgers. He died when he joined the army, because he went from being this rebel to being, part of the establishment, having his hair cut,
It was a clever move, actually. Very clever move on his part, I think. Well, it wasn't his part. It was his manager, wasn't it? Colonel Parker. He wasn't a colonel at all.
No.
He was some barker on a fairground or something. He was just a bit of a charlatan, really.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't let him go anywhere else. And the reason I read was he wouldn't go and sing outside the country because Colonel Parker couldn't leave because he was an illegal alien. He was Dutch or something. I think he was Dutch.
Yeah. And I was, so the whole thing about... Because I've spent quite a lot of time down in Tupelo in Mississippi, and by accident really, and a bit like you, I when I was growing up, Elvis was old hat. By the late 60s, early 70s, no one was really interested. Then I saw one of those films. He was in Las Vegas getting ready with the band. I remember the guitarist had this fantastic flowery Fender Telecaster guitar. It was just it just caught my imagination. And then those the Comeback Show in 1968, which I didn't see until
when he's all in black leather.
Yeah. And he's just sitting around with his mates.
They reckon he did that, because of Tom Jones. Because Tom, at that time, had made it really big in Vegas. And it was like, oh, well, I better get back on stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what they say anyway.
Yeah. So going down, you go to, and you talk about people being dirt poor. I mean, his family weren't dirt. They didn't have the dirt. Tupelo, Mississippi. Not so much a stable as a shack. This is the birthplace of Elvis Presley. They used to live in these shotgun houses in Tupelo, Mississippi. And I got to meet Miss Annie Presley. Well, Miss Annie, Becky said I should come and visit you because you were one of Gladys's, one of her oldest friends.
Yes. Anyway, we were friends for years. And she was one of my best friends.
Do you remember when you first met Gladys?
When I first met her was shortly after I married. My husband and Vernon were first cousins, and we all went to church at the same church after I married. down there at the Assembly of God, and Gladys's uncle was pastor there at that time. And then over the years, we just became best friends. I've told a lot of people she was always the first one when I needed her or needed a friend. She was the first one there. When my baby died, she was the first one there, my daughter. She picked the baby up and laid her on another bed till the doctor could get there after she died.
These were tough days. You lost a child, and Gladys lost a child. Elvis would have had a twin brother. They were hard times.
Well, it was a hard time for them. She missed the one that died terribly bad because she never could have no more. And that left Elvis an only child, and they did pet the heck out of him. Yeah. But he was a good kid considering everything. He really was.
Elvis was the only child, and a treasured child, a child that Gladys thought maybe was very special.
Yeah,
and
very protective, very protective. We'd be sitting on my porch. And some of the kids would come by, Miss Gladys, you better hurry. A bunch of boys was on Elvis. The hand boys was bad to jump on him. And jump on mine, too, because they didn't have no brothers to take up for him. Gladys, she wouldn't even take the steps. She'd jump off my porch. And it was, about 4 foot off the ground. She'd jump off my porch and go on a run and pull every one of them off and tell them they didn't leave her son alone. She'd give them a whooping, send them home. And sometimes she'd give them a lick or two.
He was a real mama's boy.
But he loved his mother. You know, I probably told you this story before, but when Dorothy Squires was singing in a nightclub in Hollywood, it was called the Moulin Rouge.
Right.
Apparently Elvis used to creep in disguise to listen to her sing My Mother's Day, because that was her big record at the time. And of course, he loved his mother.
Yeah.
You know, and when he died, Dorothy said, poor Elvis, he was my biggest fan.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so they were terribly poor. I met a guy called Frank, the Reverend Frank Smith. He was a pastor of the Pentecostal church. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everybody calls you sir down in Tupelo, which is really nice.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
They're very polite.
Yeah. So Elvis went to his, and the family all went to his little chapel, the Reverend Frank Smith, and he taught him to play Old Shep. Now, the Presley family, were they a spiritual family?
Yes, they worshiped in the church like we did. We would raise our hands and sing loud and sometimes clap our hands. Now, Elvis, he poured his heart into the singing and what he's doing. I've always played the guitar, and I think he got his wanting to play by me, you know, because I was there. That's the first time I remember him, because he would come to church with his family, but he didn't know he couldn't play guitar. But he got his inspiration to play for me, you know. We listened on Saturday night, we listened to the Grand Ole Opry. And I would stay awake on Saturday night. I would listen to them making runs, making chords, and I'd try to find that in my hands on the guitar. And I think Elvis did too. But I would go to his house, and I'd play with him, and I'd show him how to make a few chords and runs while I was doing that.
Old Shep was the song that Elvis sang at his first talent show, and
now he got it from me, and I got it on there was a man that was on the Grand Ole Opry, was the singing high sheriff. That's what he called him, and I got this song from him, and then Elvis got it from me. Now this song is about a boy and his dog, and back yonder, when dogs or horses or some of our animals would get old or get sick, they'd just put them out of their misery, kill them. And this song is about a boy and like his dog, the dog got old. Listen now. When I was a lad and old Shep was a pup, over hills and meadows we roamed, just a boy.
Wow.
You know, and I think Elvis entered a talent competition and came second, singing Old Shep. But
Old Shep, that's it, boy. Yeah. Old Shep.
And I also went to it's called the hardware, Tupelo hardware store, and I met the son of the guy who actually sold Elvis his first guitar.
Elvis Presley Enterprises actually own the whole birth site now. They put a musical exclusion zone around the house. all music other than Elvis music is forbidden. That's why I've come down here to Tupelo. This is the place he bought his first guitar. He came here with his mum. He wanted to buy a rifle. She said, if you buy a guitar, I'll go halves with you. So he bought a guitar. I came to Tupelo, Mississippi, to see a poor man's two-room shack. Well, I came to see the birthplace of the king. And the more I get to know him, as the story gets rolled back, it was gospel music made the poor boys sing, made Elvis sing.
Wow. But I mean, Elvis, like you say, he's always been there. I think he's made more money since he died than when he...
Yes.
Do you remember where you were when he died?
Yes, I do.
I can remember.
Where were you?
I was coming home from a gig late at night.
Right.
I think I've been down the south coast, like Bournemouth or Brighton or something. And then all of a sudden, this announcement goes, "The king is dead." Yeah. I thought, which kings are you talking about? Because it was Elvis.
Yeah.
It was in the 70s, wasn't it? Early 70s?
77, something like that. I remember actually it was...
Something like that, yeah.
I was in bed listening to the radio, listening to Swansea Sound on massive radio, because it sounded great. And yeah, then the news that Elvis had passed away. Yeah. It is.
But since then, he's made more money than ever. I mean, because the revivals and of course they had this show a couple of years, well, not about a year ago, I went to see it, where they had the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra had been rescored to play with the tape of Elvis, and he's on a big screen and the orchestra's on stage. You swear you were watching an Elvis concert. It was phenomenal.
Wow.
And she was there. What's her name? Priscilla was there, and she was doing a bit of announcing in between and stuff.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, his son, Dominic, was the pianist, and he got me some tickets. And of course, Dominic, he was fantastic, Dominic, playing, all the jazzy and those rock and roll riffs and that,
Yeah.
It's a great experience.
Yeah. So other things, like, I mean, the music. Now, the sad thing about the music was that Colonel Parker, although he was brilliant at his job, he sort of missed the big picture. He missed the big picture because he was so busy being, a carnival,
making money.
Yeah. So he would be more interested in selling merchandise, for a couple of dollars a time, rather than thinking. And so the music, if you wanted a song, Elvis. If you look at Elvis's credit on his records, I mean, he has written some of the biggest songs in rock and roll history. Except he didn't. If you wanted,
he pinched the ideas.
Well, if you wanted a song of Elvis to sing one of your songs, it would be, it'd be your name, and then the next name next to be, he hadn't done anything. It would be Elvis Presley, because he'd get the publishing as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, what happened was when people did were good. I think the lads who did Suspicious Minds will give them a new career. The first records they wrote and they produced, and it was their record. And then when the Colonel, next time round he's got a hit, we said, well, if you're going to write the songs for him, we're going to have have the publishing. And they said no, and then his career would dip every so often. That's the Colonel brought in that old trick again.
Yeah, because he wanted 50% of the royalties. That's right.
Yeah.
God, blink your neck. Yeah. But the thing is, I saw Elvis being interviewed once. He really hated doing those films. Yeah. Because and I remember Jerry Lee Lewis saying, he's sold out, man. He's not a rock and roller no more. He's a film star.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because really, he was a rock and roll singer.
Yeah.
I mean, he sang some good ballads, we know, but really, rock and roll. He was a good old rock and roller, wasn't he? Because what he did, he copied, I think, the American black musicians.
Yes.
And you'd hear one, and then he'd do it, but he sounded a bit black himself when you just heard the records.
Well, I think that's what he said, isn't it? Now, the guy who used to run Sun Records, Sam Phillips, he used to say, because Elvis came in and he was doing a couple of ballads in this. He wanted to make a record for his mum, and then he, well, that's all right, Mama, and he suddenly realised because he used to work with a lot of black artists, a lot of blues and soul artists who would come up from the Delta.
That's all right, my mama. That's the one,
yeah. And he suddenly found a white guy who sounded black, and he said that's right. From a marketing point of view, particularly in America, in the Deep South, then, it's not completely sorted now, but then to have that as combination as a marketing tool, it was fantastic. I mean, he sold.
Well, they used to think.
Yeah.
they used to think that Tom Jones was black when they heard him sing.
Yeah.
Because he had the same kind of, vibe, really.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he took off with Not Unusual in the States. He sounded like a black guy.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think he sold his contract for $30,000, which would have been a lot of money. But do you think how
Who
much?
did, the guy from Sun Records?
Sam Phillips, yeah. Because he realised, he said he was never going to, he wasn't going to be able to take him to the next level,
No,
so he might as well cash in now and use the money to do, what he did, Jerry Lee Lewis and Johnny Cash, the $1 Million Trio, whatever they were called, or quartet.
Yeah.
And I think, I suppose we don't really. It's hard to understand now without any social media. How would you break an artist from that part of the world? Will RCA manage to get him on?
You've got to get on all the local radio stations and then just build it.
Yeah.
I suppose that's what happens.
Yeah.
But I've always liked this stuff. I mean, even when he sang what was that? Cause my heart's on fire too. What the heck was it? It was Surrender, Come Back to Surrender, he made the record. Yeah. And he went to the charts. He'd sing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Amazing. Now then, Miss Kay Bain was a lady, when I used to go down to Tupelo, I used to do her morning show, Miss Kay Bain. Yeah. Kay and Buddy Bain. Buddy sadly was no longer with us.
We're so excited to have Mal Pope with us, and we have a surprise, Mal. I have a surprise the same as you.
Right.
You came 3 or 4 years ago to the morning show the first time that I met you.
Yes.
And Jim Corrant brought you here.
That's right, yes. It's his guitar. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, right. And so when you started to leave, of course, I was telling about all the places I was going to be and all that good stuff. And how did you get the title of this song?
Jim said, Mal, that was a great morning. You just sang with the Queen of Tupelo. And I thought, that's a song. That's a song.
All right. So let's see the Queen of Tupelo.
I came to Tupelo on Wednesday evening. On Thursday morning, I was minding my own business, fast asleep, dreaming of home, when all of a sudden, somebody banged on the door. It was 5 o'clock. Didn't know where I was. Then I suddenly remembered I had an appointment at a television station. I was going to do the morning show with Miss Kay Bain. And I got there and she looked after me so well. It was like Mother's Day for me, but on Thursday. And she set up my microphone for me to sing, and I'm here doing a program about Elvis this time. And Kay was telling me about how she'd worked with Elvis in the past, and I said it'd be great to get you to be a part of my radio program. She said, well, I'm busy. I've got 2 shows with the old folks today, and then I'm going down to Houston. And she said, but maybe Sunday. Maybe we could find some time on Sunday. Maybe I can get a window going on. So that was nice. And it's funny because we come from completely different worlds. And as we were driving away, we just sang the song Amazing Grace. And I think we'd maybe touched something that was common in both of us when we sang that song. And as we were driving away, Jim, who was looking after me, said, well, you had a great morning there with the Queen of Tupelo. I thought that sounds like a great start for a song.
But she's told all these stories when he was just coming through, when he was just becoming, becoming famous, and where he wouldn't be top of the bill. And he'd be traveling.
Buddy Holly above him.
Yeah. Well, Kay and Buddy Bain would be it sometimes, because they were like the radio stars, and Elvis was just a local boy making records. And they travelled around this station wagon. You think now, even with your PV, sound system in the 70s, you had to have a big car, didn't you? They used to travel around just a double bass, some drums and a guitar, and they'd go around like a station wagon to do all these gigs,
Yeah, and travel lots of, America's vast, so it'd be huge distances, I should think, as well.
Yeah.
In all the gigs. Oh my God!
As you say, it's he's making more money now. If you ever get a chance to go to Graceland, it looks like the White House, but it is smaller. But across the road, and I think it's down to Priscilla and her business partners, that they've developed the whole site into Elvis Presley world. They've got museums for the cars and the airplanes and the whole lot. Nice little touches. If you go into Graceland, and they haven't got barriers, but they've got little sort of like not chains, but like ropes off.
Yeah.
And if you step over the rope, or you lean over too much to look into something or other, there's a voice comes and says, "Will you please go behind the barrier? Thank you very much."
I tell you what, my agent Bunny Lewis, he was quite a big. He was a producer for Decca at one point. He said I went to Graceland. Says, oh, Bunny was frightfully posh. He was one of those. Yeah,
Bunny.
He had like the George Crossford War. He's in the SEF. Oh. So I said, what was it like? He said, well, it was a big house, but there wasn't much taste. So I don't know what it looked like inside. The jungle room and all that. The
jungle room, yeah. And what was the room? There was one room with a shag pile carpet on the floor, on the walls, and on the ceiling. It was like... I think he'd seen a picture of the president who had 3 or 4 TVs with all the different stations on at the same time. So he had a room with 3 or 4 TVs on. So he could have yeah.
But they say he was a very generous bloke. I mean, for instance, he'd give people Cadillacs for Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, his mates that work with him, and then he'd go, oh, yeah, I bought your car, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he had plenty of money, but that's beside the point. I mean, he was just a generous bloke, apparently.
Yeah.
He come from nothing, but he thought, well, I'm going to share my wealth with my mates.
Yeah. When I was in...
he's into karate as well.
That's right, and that's where all that sort of, you know...
Yeah, all that
the stuff in the show came on, isn't it? I met this guy called Jerry Schilling. And I'd read, obviously, when I went to Tupelo and to Memphis, I became a bit of an Elvis, freak, really. I was just, I'd read everything about him and just, get all the backstory. And there was, and I'd seen a picture of this guy called Jerry Schilling, who was one of the Memphis Mafia. They were the guys who went around with him everywhere. And I was walking through Memphis, just waiting to get a cab to the airport to go home. And I saw him. I saw Jerry Schilling.
What?
So I went,
wow.
So I chased him. He was in the Memphis press bureau or something, and I said, "I'm really sorry to bother you. I'm from I said I'm from the BBC, making a radio program about Elvis. Would you mind if I had a little chat with you? Because you're Jerry Schilling, aren't you?" Jerry Schilling was one of the legendary Memphis Mafia who lived, worked, and played with Elvis. Graceland is now a museum, but once it had been a home for Elvis and also for Jerry Schilling.
It wasn't a crazy party place as you would think. We partied more out in the West Coast.
Because Elvis sort of almost adopted you in a way, the way he sort of saw you on the sidelines and brought you into the family.
Well, when I was 12 years old, I had been into music for about 2 years. I was really into rhythm and blues. I listened to Dewey Phillips and stuff, and I lived in North Memphis where Elvis lived. I didn't know that at the time, and the first night Dewey played Elvis's record, I was listening. And the next day I went to my local playground, tried to get up a football game or a basketball game or something, and there were 5 older guys trying to get up a game. That's how unpopular Elvis was. And Red West knew I played grade school football, said, "You want to play with us?" And I said, "Sure." And we got in the huddle, and I immediately knew that was the guy I heard last night. Elvis was different before he became a star. I don't think Elvis ever forgot that I really liked him and thought he was cool before it was popular, too. Mm. And so we used to play football every Sunday, and then, of course, his career took off. And I went down to the Memphian Theater one night because I was working my way through college, and I was loading trucks and stuff, and I went by the movie theater because I knew when Elvis went, he always went late. I hadn't seen him in a while. I got there, and they were just stopping the screening, and he was getting ready to leave. And he was down by the screen, and I was up at the front, and I saw him look up, and I looked. I figured, I won't bother him. I'll come back tomorrow night. He looked tired. So Richard Davis, one of the guys with him, said, you want to go with me to take the film back to the film exchange, and then we'll go have breakfast. It's 3 o'clock in the morning now. And I said, let's do it tomorrow. He said, well, we'll go to California tomorrow. I said, okay. So I went to the film exchange with Richard, and Elvis called Richard and said, do you know how to get a hold of Jerry Schilling? And he said, he's here. So he said, ask him if he'll come out to the house. And he said, I need you to go to work for him. He only had like 3 people working for him at the time. And I said, when? He said, now. So I rushed back out to Graceland, and what's called the Jungle Room now was just a screened-in porch. I sit there all day, and we left about midnight that night. Big bus, Elvis did all the driving. We'd stop at truck stops. He would throw the football, I'd run after, catch it, because they had all these lights out there. By the time we got to California, I'd probably lost 15 pounds. Elvis said, what happened to that big guy I hired?
to be honest, the more I've seen of the story, I'm surprised that he managed to cope with it so well. I know things didn't turn out fantastically in the end, but for all that to come to somebody so young.
You know, Elvis was a very, very intelligent, bright human being. He handled it better than anybody in that situation. I don't think that all the business people around handled it as well as Elvis. He always thought in the future. He always could create new things. And business, because he did so well, got so conservative and so greedy that they didn't give him the opportunities to have a good script. You know, why pay for a good script and good co-stars when these movies are making money anyway? Elvis didn't die of drugs. Those were the Band-Aids that covered up his creative disappointments.
Before I leave, the fun side of things, we've been serious, but the pure fun of being with Elvis, with the horses, with the cars.
You know, we had great time. We worked hard when we worked, whether it was in the films or on the road. But when we played hard. We could play football. We'd start sometimes in the afternoons. Then when it got dark, we'd go to another field with lights on, and then go to movies all night after that. Eat hamburgers. It was like if you dreamed how you would like to live. I still feel a big part of that's still in me. It doesn't seem like he's been gone this long.
What do you remember most about him? I mean, obviously you miss him. You can hear that in your voice. What do you remember most about him?
Talking with him late at night, you could really see the humanity in him. And really, he was more than just an entertainer. He was a great entertainer, but I don't know, he had some mission. I always felt very safe with Elvis around. I knew if anything ever happened, probably nothing would happen, but, he would be there. He was that kind of person.
Yeah, I wish I'd seen him live, actually. I mean, there's a lot of these people I wish I'd seen live. I mean, I did see Sammy Davis live twice.
Was he good?
And he was one of my idols, Sammy Davis.
Yeah.
But I never saw Elvis live, and I never saw Sinatra live. But you know what I did, Gavin and Stacey? Do you remember the bit I did? Because they have the big Elvis festival in Portugal, don't they?
Yes, yeah.
So I had this line in it where I had 7 Elvises all lined up at the coffee shop, and I went, "Oh, Stace, come on, I got 7 Elvises here, all gasping for a cappuccino." That's a great line, isn't it?
That's a great line.
Because that's apparently the biggest in the world, the Elvis thing in Portugal.
Amazing. I mean, I love the whole story.
Have you ever been to that convention in Portugal? They all get up and they're all dressed as Elvis. They come from all over the world.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. Yeah. But the funny thing is, when I was last in Tupelo, and it's probably about 10 years now since I was last there, I bumped into somebody who was in school. There was Miss Becky, who'd been in junior school with him, and then I met somebody on the street, and he was a really old guy, really old, and quite large, and he'd been in school with Elvis, and he said, "Yeah, me and Elvis were pals and all that," and you realise that's what Elvis would look like now, isn't it?
What would he be? He'd be 80, wouldn't he?
Maybe even older, maybe.
Bit older, a bit older than 80, 82 perhaps.
Yeah.
But still, he went too young, you know what I mean? How old was he when he died? 40 something?
Just a kid.
Something.
Just a kid, in our opinion.
Just a kid, younger than me.
Probably younger than me either. All right.
I mean, Elvis will never die. He's the king of rock and roll, and that's it forever.
Live forever. Well, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elvis has left the building.